"Sir, they made me live in there," the little girl told the millionaire, but when he goes inside, he discovers something shocking. Let me know what you thought of this story by rating it from 0 to 10 and tell me which city you're watching from. I'd love to know if you enjoyed my story and get to know you better, so please subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The August heat in Cedar Creek, Texas, was relentless, and David Henry Montgomery felt sweat trickling down his dress shirt as he walked across the vacant lot he had just purchased. At 52, the CEO of Montgomery and Associates Construction had a habit of personally inspecting every property before starting any project. That particular lot had caught his attention due to its low price and prime location in the center of the Texan city. The land seemed to have been abandoned for decades. Tall weeds grew among the debris of an old structure, and right in the center stood a century-old live oak of impressive proportions. David approached the gigantic tree, admiring its gnarled trunk that must have been at least 12 feet in diameter. It was a shame it would have to be removed to make way for the new residential development. That's when he heard it. A faint voice, almost a whisper, came from inside the tree. David stopped, frowning, thinking it might be an injured animal trapped among the roots. But when he listened closely, he realized it was a human voice, a child's voice. "Please, it's so dark in here." David's heart raced. He ran around the massive trunk until he found a natural opening at the base of the oak, a cavity that seemed to have been formed by the irregular growth of the bark over the years. From inside came a strong, unpleasant odor, a mixture of dampness, mold, and something reminiscent of animal droppings. "Hello? Is someone in there?" he called out, trying to see into the darkness. "Sir?" the voice replied, filled with both hope and fear. David took his phone out of his pocket and turned on the flashlight. What he saw sent a chill down his spine. Cuddled in the back of the cavity, a small girl watched him with huge, almond-shaped eyes, her thin face covered in dirt. Her curly hair was tangled and filthy, and she was visibly trembling, despite the suffocating heat of the day. "My God," he murmured, crouching at the entrance of the opening. "Little girl, what are you doing in there?" "They made me live here," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "She said I couldn't leave until Mommy came back." David felt a tightness in his chest. The child couldn't be more than 4 years old, and she was visibly sick and frightened. As he illuminated the interior of the cavity better, he noticed dozens of bats hanging from the ceiling of the hollow tree, and the floor was covered in accumulated guano. "What's your name, dear?" he asked, forcing his voice to sound calm and reassuring. "Isabella Christine," she replied, trying to approach the entrance but stumbling from weakness. "Isabella, my name is David. I'm going to get you out of there, okay? You're sick. You need help." "I can't leave," she protested weakly. "Aunt Norma said that if I left, Mommy Claire would never be able to find me when she came back. She said this is the safe place where my mom will look for me." David felt anger rise in his throat. What kind of person would leave a small child living in such terrible conditions? He reached out his hand to her, noticing she had a high fever. Her skin was burning even from a distance. "Isabella, your mother would want you to be taken care of while she can't be here. Let's go to the doctor, and then we'll talk about where you should stay, all right?" The girl hesitated, looking around the damp, dark cavity as if it were truly her home. David realized she had tried to make the space more habitable. There was a torn rag doll in a corner, some dry leaves arranged as if they were a bed, and pieces of hardened bread piled near the entrance. "How long have you been here, Isabella?" he asked, extending his hand again. "I don't know," she murmured. "Many days. Aunt Norma used to bring food, but she stopped coming. Only the little birds keep me company now." David looked up and saw the bats moving restlessly at his presence. The environment was completely unsanitary for an adult, let alone a small child. Isabella began to cough violently, a wet sound that indicated serious respiratory problems. "Isabella, do you trust me?" he asked softly. She studied him with those big, intelligent eyes, as if trying to see into his soul. Then slowly, she extended her dirty little hand and took David's. "You look like the daddy from my dreams," she whispered. The comment touched David deeply. He had no children. He and his late wife Marianne had never been able to conceive, a pain he had carried for years. With infinite care, he helped Isabella out of the cavity, noticing how little she weighed for a 4-year-old. When the girl stood in the sun, David could see her condition better. She was visibly malnourished, her clothes were inadequate and dirty, and she was breathing with difficulty. But what impressed him most were her eyes. Despite all the suffering, there was still a spark of hope there, an inner strength that refused to be broken. "Let's get out of here," he said, taking off his jacket and wrapping her in it carefully. "You'll never have to sleep in that place again." As he carried Isabella to his car, David couldn't stop wondering how a child had ended up in such a terrible situation. And why this specific lot, a property he had bought with practically no knowledge of its history, had become the desperate refuge of an abandoned girl. What he didn't know was that this land held secrets much deeper than he imagined, and that saving Isabella would be just the first step on a journey that would reveal truths buried for decades and change their lives forever. Cedar Creek General Hospital was bustling on Thursday afternoon when David arrived, carrying Isabella in his arms. The girl had lost consciousness during the ride, her breathing becoming increasingly labored. Desperation took hold of him when he saw how pale and fragile she looked against his chest. "I need help here," he shouted as he entered the emergency room, attracting the attention of nurses and doctors. Dr. Lisa Foster, a 38-year-old pediatrician with brown hair tied in a bun, was the first to respond. Her experienced eyes quickly assessed the child's condition as she directed David to a gurney in the emergency room. "How long has she been like this?" Lisa asked, already placing her stethoscope on Isabella's chest. "I'm not sure. I found her just over an hour ago, living inside a tree," David replied, still trying to process the surrealness of the situation. Inside a tree. The doctor frowned but didn't stop examining the girl. "Does she have any documents? A legal guardian?" "I don't know anything about her except that her name is Isabella Christine. She said an Aunt Norma left her there, waiting for her mother to come back." Lisa ordered a series of urgent tests while Isabella was connected to monitors. The situation was serious. Severe pneumonia, dehydration, malnutrition, and signs that she had been exposed to unsanitary conditions for a prolonged period. "Sir," Lisa began. "David Montgomery," he completed. "Mr. Montgomery, I need you to tell me exactly where you found this child. Her condition is very serious." David recounted all the details while watching Isabella receive an IV drip and oxygen. The doctor took notes, her expression growing more and more concerned. "This situation needs to be reported to Child Protective Services," Lisa said. "But first, let's stabilize her. She has pneumonia, likely caused by fungi and bacteria present in a damp, contaminated environment." While waiting in the waiting room, David couldn't get the image of Isabella huddled in that dark cavity out of his mind. Who was this Aunt Norma, and where was the girl's mother? He decided to use the time to try to find out more information. 3 hours later, Lisa approached with a strange expression on her face. "How is she?" David asked, standing up immediately. "Stable, but she'll need to be hospitalized for at least a week. Mr. Montgomery, can I speak with you in private?" They went to a private office. Lisa closed the door and sat down, indicating a chair for him. "I checked our system and found some disturbing records about Isabella Christine," she began. "This isn't the first time she's been brought here." David felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean?" "In the last 8 months, She's been admitted 4 times, always brought in by different people who identified themselves as relatives, but never stayed to give complete information. Once it was a woman who said she was an aunt, another time a man who claimed to be a cousin, and twice it was neighbors who found her alone. "That's impossible," David murmured. "Where were her legal guardians?" "That's the issue. We've never been able to contact any real guardians. The people who brought her in always gave vague excuses and disappeared. The last time 2 months ago, a social worker tried to investigate but found no fixed address or valid documents." Lisa opened Isabella's file and showed him photos from previous hospitalizations. In all of them, the girl showed signs of neglect, malnutrition, poorly treated injuries, clothes inappropriate for the weather. "Dr. Foster," David paused, "do you think she was being mistreated?" "The signs are consistent with severe abandonment and neglect, but we were never able to identify the guardians to investigate properly. Isabella would always be admitted until she got better, and then someone would show up to take her home." David ran his hands over his face, trying to organize his thoughts. "She told me an Aunt Norma left her in the tree, waiting for her mother to come back. She mentioned a Mommy Claire." "I'll check if there are any records of those names in our files," Lisa said, already typing on the computer. While the doctor searched, David watched the hospital activity through the office blinds. Families waited for news, children cried in their parents' arms, and he wondered how Isabella had survived so long without proper care. "I found something," Lisa said, frowning. "There's a record of a woman named Norma Estelle Fisher, who brought Isabella in during her second admission. She identified herself as an aunt and left a phone number that we later found out was fake." "Norma Estelle." David repeated the name, trying to commit it to memory. "And there's more," the doctor continued. "On her first admission, the person who brought her in was a man named Maurice Todd Sanders. He said he was Isabella's stepfather and was visibly intoxicated. He also left false information." The puzzle was beginning to form in David's mind. 2 different people, both lying about their identities, but both having access to Isabella. What kind of family situation was this? "Doctor, can I see Isabella now?" he asked. "You can, but she's sedated. The medication will help her rest while her body fights the infection." In the pediatric room, Isabella seemed even smaller in the hospital bed. Connected to machines, breathing with the help of an oxygen mask, she was unrecognizable from the frightened girl he had found in the tree just a few hours before. David pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down. Even unconscious, Isabella seemed restless, turning her head from side to side and murmuring unintelligible words. "Mommy Claire, won't go away," she whispered in her sleep. David's heart ached. The child was clearly traumatized by the separation from her mother and the abandonment she had experienced. He leaned in close and gently held her small hand. "It's okay, Isabella. You're safe now," he murmured, though she couldn't hear. Just then, a nurse entered the room to check her vitals. She looked at David with curiosity. "Are you her father, sir?" the nurse asked. "No, I found her abandoned," David explained briefly. "What a sad situation," she commented, adjusting the IV drip. "Poor thing, she's so little to have gone through so much suffering." After the nurse left, David remained by Isabella's side, watching her breathing gradually stabilize. He couldn't understand why he felt so responsible for this child he had known for only a few hours. Maybe it was because he recognized in her eyes the same loneliness he had carried since losing Marianne, or maybe it was simply the awareness that he couldn't turn his back on a helpless child who clearly needed protection. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was Robert, his partner at the construction company, probably wanting a report on the new land. "Hi, Robert, I can't talk right now," he answered in a low voice. "David, where are you?" We have a meeting with the investors in 2 hours. You'll have to reschedule. An emergency came up. What kind of emergency? A problem with the new lot? David looked at Isabella, still sleeping peacefully despite all the tubes and wires connected to her. It's complicated, Robert. I'll call you later. Hanging up the phone, David made a decision that would change his life forever. No matter what he discovered about Isabella's family or the circumstances that led her to this terrible situation, he would not abandon her. At least not until he was sure she would be truly safe and cared for. What he didn't imagine was that his determination to protect Isabella would lead him to uncover secrets buried for years, involving people he thought he knew, and revelations that would put his own life at risk. The next morning, David arrived at the hospital even before visiting hours. He had spent a sleepless night searching the internet for any information on Norma Estelle Fisher and Maurice Todd Sanders, but had found nothing relevant. Isabella was awake when he entered the room, looking out the window with her big, melancholic eyes. "Hi, Isabella," he said softly, approaching the bed. "How are you feeling?" "Better," she answered in a still, weak voice. "You came back." "Of course I came back. I said I'd take care of you, didn't I?" Isabella smiled shyly, the first time he had seen her show any joy. It was a smile that lit up her entire thin face, completely transforming her. "Isabella, I need to ask you a few questions about your family, okay? So we can find your mommy Claire." The girl's face tightened with worry. "Is she lost?" "We don't know where she is. Can you tell me about her?" Isabella was quiet for a moment, as if organizing the memories in her 4-year-old mind. "Mommy Claire has long hair and smells like flowers. She always sang to me to sleep. But one day she got very sad and said bad men wanted to separate us." David felt a shiver. Bad men? She cried a lot and said I had to stay in a safe place until she could come back. Then Aunt Norma took me away from the yellow house. Yellow house. Our house had a garden with red roses. Mommy took care of them every day. Isabella paused, her eyes filling with tears. "Do you think the roses are dying without her?" David's heart ached at the innocence of the question. "I'm sure your mom is taking care of the roses, dear." At that moment, Dr. Foster entered the room accompanied by a thin woman of about 45, with a severe expression and formal clothes. "Mr. Montgomery, this is Sandra Oliver from Child Protective Services. She needs to talk to us about Isabella." Sandra greeted David coldly and looked at Isabella with professional eyes, assessing her condition. "Mr. Montgomery, I understand you found the child in a state of abandonment." "Yes, living inside a hollow tree, in a deplorable state. And you have no family relationship with her?" "None. I'm just someone who found her and couldn't leave her in those conditions." Sandra jotted everything down on her clipboard, asking detailed questions about the circumstances of the rescue. Isabella watched everything in silence, clearly uncomfortable with the social worker's presence. "The child will have to be transferred to a temporary foster home while we investigate her family situation," Sandra declared. "No!" Isabella suddenly screamed, grabbing David's arm. "I don't want to go. I want to stay with Uncle David." The girl's desperate reaction surprised everyone. David felt the grip of her small hands on his arm and saw the terror in her eyes. "Sandra, she has just been rescued from a traumatic situation," Dr. Foster intervened. "Perhaps it's better to wait for her to recover physically before another move. The rules are clear. We cannot leave a child in the care of someone without a family or legal tie." David thought quickly. What if I applied for temporary foster care? I have the financial means, a suitable home, and Isabella has already bonded with me. Sandra studied him with skepticism. The process takes weeks. Background checks, a home visit, psychological evaluation. Then at least let her stay here until she fully recovers. I'll be responsible for all hospital costs and stay with her the whole time. Dr. Foster supported the suggestion, arguing that moving Isabella again would be detrimental to her recovery. Reluctantly, Sandra agreed to a prolonged hospital stay, but warned that she would be back in 3 days for a re-evaluation. After the social worker left, Isabella visibly relaxed. "Uncle David, you're not going to let them take me away, are you?" "I'll do everything in my power to protect you," he promised. During lunch, while helping Isabella eat, David decided to try to get more information about her past. "Isabella, do you remember Aunt Norma? What was she like?" Aunt Norma got angry really fast. She would fight with Uncle Maurice when he drank the brown bottles. "Did Uncle Maurice live with you?" "He would show up and Aunt Norma would get scared. He yelled a lot and broke things." Isabella paused, picking at her food. "Once he hurt Aunt Norma, and she cried a lot." David felt anger growing in his chest. The situation was worse than he had imagined. Isabella had been exposed not only to neglect, but also to domestic violence. "And where was your mummy Claire when this happened?" "Mummy wasn't with us anymore. Aunt Norma said she had to go away because of the bad men, but that she would come back when it was safe." That afternoon, David decided to investigate on his own. He left Isabella sleeping under Dr. Foster's care and drove to the lot where he had found her. Maybe there was a clue about who had left her there. The place was exactly as it was the day before, except now he noticed details he had missed in his rush to help Isabella. Around the live oak were remnants of old food, hardened bread, rotting fruit peels, an empty water bottle. Searching the area carefully, he found something that made his blood run cold. A driver's license, partially destroyed by moisture, but still legible. The name was Norma Estelle Fisher, and the listed address was in a peripheral neighborhood of Cedar Creek. With the address in hand, David drove to the location. It was a small, poorly maintained house with an overgrown garden and dirty windows. There were no signs that anyone had lived there recently. He knocked on the door several times but got no response. An elderly neighbor appeared at the house next door, watching him with curiosity. "Are you looking for Norma?" the neighbor asked. "Yes. Do you know her?" "Knew her. She disappeared about 2 months ago. Had a little girl living with her, poor thing. Always saw the child playing alone in the yard." "What happened to them?" "Norma was acting kind of crazy in the last few weeks before she vanished. Said men were chasing her, that she had to hide the girl. Then one day, a big, drunk-looking man showed up here yelling at her. After that, I never saw Norma or the child again." "This man, what did he look like?" "Tall, kind of bald, always smelled of booze. Norma was terrified of him. Called him Maurice, I think." David thanked him for the information and returned to his car, processing what he had discovered. Norma had disappeared 2 months ago, around the same time as Isabella's last hospital stay, and Maurice was involved somehow. Back at the hospital, he found Isabella awake and drawing on a piece of paper a nurse had given her. It was a simple but touching drawing, a yellow house with red flowers in front and 2 female figures holding hands. "Is that you and your mommy?" he asked. "Yes, at our house. Do you think she's looking for me?" "I'm sure she is," David replied, but internally he wondered if Claire was even alive. That night, alone at home, David made a decision that would change everything. He called his personal lawyer, Charlie Mendoza, and asked him to expedite the process for Isabella's temporary foster care as much as possible. "David, are you sure about this?" Charlie asked. "Taking responsibility for a child is a permanent thing, I'm sure. This girl needs protection, and I'm in a position to offer it. And if the biological parents show up wanting her back, then we'll face that when it happens. But for now, she has no one else." What David didn't know was that his investigations had attracted the attention of dangerous people, and that his decision to protect Isabella would place him at the center of a much more complex and sinister plot than he imagined. A week later, Isabella was discharged from the hospital, but David still hadn't gotten approval for temporary foster care. Sandra Oliver had been inflexible about not letting the girl leave the hospital without a definitive solution for her custody. That's when Charlie Mendoza showed up at the hospital with an unexpected proposal. "I managed to get an emergency hearing for this afternoon," the lawyer told David as they walked down the hall. "But there's a complication. The judge assigned to the case is Judge Sebastian Cordero." "Why is that a complication?" "Sebastian is, let's say, very strict with foster care cases, especially when there are no family ties. He will question your motives intensely." David stopped walking. "Are you suggesting I give up?" "No, but be prepared for a battle. Sebastian has a reputation for prioritizing institutions over substitute families, especially for complex cases like this one." A few hours later, David found himself in the Cedar Creek courthouse, nervous but determined. The hearing room was small and formal, dominated by an imposing bench where Judge Sebastian Cordero sat, a man of about 60, with impeccably combed grey hair and piercing eyes behind gold-rimmed glasses. "Mr. Montgomery," Sebastian began in a grave voice, "I've read the case report, a rather unusual situation. Your Honor, the child was in imminent danger. I couldn't just ignore it. No one is questioning your initial good deed. The question is your suitability to assume permanent responsibility for an unknown minor." Sebastian leafed through the papers before him with deliberate movements, as if each page were being carefully evaluated. "I see you are the owner of Montgomery and Associates, a successful company, from what I can see." "Yes, sir. I've been in civil construction for 15 years. And you've never been married, no children." The question touched an old wound in David. "I was married to Marianne for 12 years. She passed away 3 years ago. We didn't have children." "I'm sorry for your loss," Sebastian said, but his expression remained impassive. "Can you explain to me why, after 3 years as a widower, you suddenly decide to adopt a child?" "It wasn't sudden. I found Isabella in a terrible situation and felt a responsibility for her. She trusts me, and I am able to provide a safe home." Sebastian leaned back in his chair, studying David with uncomfortable attention. "Mr. Montgomery, the lot where you found the child, how did you acquire it?" The question seemed to come out of nowhere, leaving David confused. "I bought it through a real estate agency. Why is that relevant?" "Just professional curiosity. Lots in downtown Cedar Creek are valuable. It must have cost a considerable amount." "It was an investment for my company," David replied, not understanding where the conversation was heading. Sebastian made a few notes and then called Sandra Oliver to testify about her evaluation of David as a foster candidate. "Mr. Montgomery's residence is suitable," Sandra reported. "Large house, safe neighborhood, stable financial conditions. But I cannot ignore the fact that he has no experience with children and that the minor may be too traumatized for such a drastic change." "And what is your recommendation?" Sebastian asked. "Temporary institutional placement while we investigate the child's family situation." David stood up. "With all due respect, Isabella has already been through enough abandonment. Placing her in an institution would traumatize her even more." "Mr. Montgomery," Sebastian said in a warning tone, "it is not up to you to determine what is best for the minor. But it is up to you to listen to what she wants," David retorted, frustration showing in his voice. A tense silence filled the room. Sebastian drummed his fingers on the bench, clearly pondering the decision. "I will grant a temporary placement of 30 days, he said finally, with weekly visits from social services and bi-weekly reports on the child's development. Any irregularity will result in an immediate transfer to an appropriate institution." David felt relieved, but also sensed that Sebastian was not completely convinced. There was something in the way the judge looked at him that made him uncomfortable. "Thank you, Your Honor," David said, standing up. "Mr. Montgomery," Sebastian called out as he was heading for the door, "I hope you understand the responsibility you are taking on. Abandoned children often carry complex baggage. Sometimes it is better for everyone when trained professionals take care of them." "I understand perfectly, Your Honor." Back at the hospital, David found an anxious Isabella playing nervously with the doll he had bought for her. "So, Uncle David, can I go with you?" "Yes, you can, Princess. We're going home." The smile that lit up Isabella's face was worth all the tension of the hearing. As she gathered her few belongings, Dr. Foster approached David. "Did you get custody?" "Temporary, for now. Lisa, can I ask you something about Isabella's history?" "Of course. You mentioned that different people brought her here. Did any of them leave information that could help locate her real family?" Lisa hesitated. "Actually, there's something strange I didn't mention before. The first time Isabella was admitted, the person who signed the papers had a power of attorney that seemed questionable." "How so?" "It was very generic, without specifying who exactly had authority over the child, but it was stamped by the Cedar Creek Central Notary's office." David felt something stir in his mind. "Do you remember who signed the original power of attorney?" "Let me check." Lisa went to get the old files and returned with a yellowish folder. "Here it is. The power of attorney was issued by Sebastian Cordero." David's blood ran cold. The same judge who had just decided on Isabella's custody had signed documents related to her months before. "Is that normal?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm. "It shouldn't be. Judges don't usually issue powers of attorney for cases they might later preside over. It's a conflict of interest." David carefully filed this information away as he took Isabella to his home. During the drive, the girl watched everything through the window with curious eyes, as if seeing the world for the first time. "Uncle David, is your house big?" "It's bigger than necessary for one person, but now I won't be alone anymore, right?" "No, now you have Isabella," she said, clapping her hands. Upon arriving home, a colonial mansion in the best neighborhood of Cedar Creek, Isabella was amazed. She ran through the spacious rooms, admired the manicured garden, and chose the room she wanted as her own, a large space with a view of the backyard, where she could see the trees and birds. That night, while Isabella slept in her new bed, David lay awake thinking about the power of attorney signed by Sebastian Cordero. Why would a judge be involved in Isabella's case before she even officially appeared in the system? And why had he shown so much interest in the lot where David had found her? One thing was becoming clear. Isabella's story was much more complicated than it seemed, and powerful people were involved in ways he didn't yet understand. The next day, David decided to investigate more deeply. He would start at the notary's office where the power of attorney had been issued. If Sebastian Cordero was involved in Claire's disappearance, he would find out how. What David didn't know was that his investigation had already been noticed, and that people determined to keep secrets buried would do anything to stop him from discovering the truth about Isabella's past and her family. 2 weeks later, David and Isabella's routine had settled into a surprisingly natural rhythm. The girl showed an impressive ability to adapt, transforming the large, silent house into a home full of life. She had befriended Mrs. Carmen, the housekeeper who came 3 times a week and spent hours drawing in David's office while he worked. It was during one of these quiet mornings that David decided to visit the notary's office. He left Isabella playing with Mrs. Carmen and headed downtown, determined to find out more about the mysterious power of attorney. The central notary's office of Cedar Creek was an old building with narrow corridors and dusty files. The clerk in charge of old records was Maurice Todd Sanders. The same Maurice who had taken Isabella to the hospital months before. David's heart raced when he saw the name on the desk plate. He was a man of about 45, with a scruffy appearance and red eyes that betrayed a problem with alcohol. When Maurice looked up and saw David approaching, his expression changed instantly, from indifferent to alert and nervous. "Good morning," David said, trying to keep his voice casual. "I need information about a power of attorney issued a few months ago." "What power of attorney?" Maurice asked, already showing resistance. "One signed by Judge Sebastian Cordero, related to a minor named Isabella Christine." Maurice visibly paled. His hands trembled slightly as he fumbled with the papers on his desk. "I don't know what you're talking about. You need to be more specific." "I'm sure you do. You yourself took the girl to the hospital using that power of attorney." The silence that followed was charged with tension. Maurice looked around nervously, as if checking if anyone was listening to the conversation. "Sir, I was just doing what I was told," he finally murmured. "Who told you?" "I can't talk about that here. It's dangerous." "Dangerous how?" Maurice stood up abruptly, closing his desk drawers with sharp movements. "I need to go to lunch. If you want official information, come back another day and talk to my supervisor." Before David could insist, Maurice had rushed out of the notary's office, leaving him alone with more questions than answers. Determined not to give up, David decided to follow Maurice discreetly. The man headed straight for a shady bar on the outskirts of the city, where he ordered a double shot of whiskey and sat in a dark corner. David entered the bar a few minutes later and positioned himself where he could watch Maurice without being noticed. The man drank compulsively, trembling and constantly looking at the door, clearly terrified of something. After the third shot, Maurice started talking to himself, muttering words that David tried to catch. Occasionally, he heard fragments. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this. The girl shouldn't be alive. Sebastian is going to finish me." When Maurice staggered to the bathroom, David took the opportunity to approach his table. He had left an old cell phone on the table, and David could see there were several missed calls from a number saved as S. Cordero. "What are you doing here?" a voice asked behind him. David turned and found Maurice, now more sober and visibly annoyed. "I was looking for you to talk," David said honestly. "About what?" "About Isabella Christine, about what happened to her mother." Maurice looked around nervously and then gestured for David to follow him. They left the bar and walked to a nearby vacant lot where Maurice finally stopped. "You don't know what you're getting into," he said, his voice thick with alcohol and fear. "Then explain it to me." "Claire didn't disappear. She was taken." "Taken by whom?" "On Sebastian's orders. He said she knew things that could harm important people." David felt his blood run cold. "What kind of things?" "Fake documents, stolen properties, people being scammed for years." Maurice paused to breathe heavily. "Claire worked as a secretary in a law firm and found out Sebastian was forging deeds." "And why are you involved in this?" "Because I was married to Norma, who was Claire's sister. When Sebastian found out Claire knew too much, he threatened our whole family. Said if we didn't help shut her up, we'd all have problems." "How did you shut her up?" Maurice began to cry, tears streaming down his dirty face. "We forged documents saying she was crazy, that she was having psychotic breaks. Sebastian had doctors who signed false reports. She was forcibly committed to a private clinic." "Where?" "In Austin, Northwood Clinic. But you can't go there. Sebastian has people watching it." "And Isabella?" "Claire begged us to leave Isabella with Norma, at least until she could get out of the clinic. But Norma got scared, and I drank a lot. I couldn't take proper care of the girl." David felt anger growing in his chest. "You abandoned a 4-year-old child." "Norma tried to take care of her, But Sebastian started putting on pressure. He said the girl was living evidence that if she grew up, she might remember things that could compromise the plan. Norma panicked and hid Isabella in the tree, thinking it would be temporary. "And where is Norma now?" "Dead," Maurice murmured. "Suicide, according to the official version. But I know it was Sebastian. She was about to tell the truth about Claire." The world spun around David. The situation was much worse than he had imagined. Isabella wasn't just an abandoned child. She was a living witness to serious crimes, and powerful people wanted to silence her. "Why are you telling me all this?" David asked. "Because I can't carry this weight anymore, and because the girl doesn't deserve to pay for the adult's mistakes." Maurice looked directly at David. "But you need to be very careful. Sebastian found out the girl is alive and that you found her." "How did he find out?" "He has contacts everywhere. The hospital, CPS, the notary's office. Nothing goes unnoticed." "And what does he plan to do?" "I don't know for sure, but I'm certain he'll try to take the girl from you one way or another. And if you keep investigating—" Maurice didn't need to finish the sentence. The threat was clear. "Maurice, you have to help me find Claire. If she's alive in that clinic, we can save her." "It's impossible. The clinic has private security and Sebastian pays very well to keep Claire sedated and isolated." "There must be a way." "You don't understand. Sebastian isn't just a corrupt judge. He has connections with dangerous people, politicians, businessmen, even organized crime." David returned home with his mind reeling. Isabella was waiting for him anxiously, running to hug him as soon as he walked in. "Uncle David, I drew our family," she said, showing him a drawing of herself, him, and a female figure she had identified as Mommy Claire. "It's beautiful, Princess," he said, hugging her tightly, but his heart was heavy with the knowledge that Claire was imprisoned and that their lives were in danger. That night, after Isabella fell asleep, David called Charlie Mendoza. "Charlie, I need your help with something very serious and dangerous." "What is it?" "I found out that Sebastian Cordero is involved in document forgery and forced institutionalization. Isabella's mother has been locked in a psychiatric clinic for years." "David, those are very serious accusations against a judge. Are you sure?" "I have a witness willing to confess everything." "Then we need to act fast and very carefully. If this is true, Sebastian will do everything to stop the truth from coming out." David looked out the window to Isabella's room, where she slept peacefully, oblivious to the danger surrounding them. "He already knows we're investigating, Charlie. I don't think we have much time." The next morning, David woke up to the sound of the phone ringing insistently. It was Sandra Oliver from CPS with a call that made his blood freeze. "Mr. Montgomery, I need to make an inspection visit today. We received an anonymous complaint about inadequacies in Isabella's care." "What kind of complaint?" David asked, already suspicious. "Allegations that the child is being exposed to inappropriate situations and that you lack the proper experience to care for a traumatized minor." David looked at Isabella, who was eating breakfast cheerfully in the kitchen, humming a song as she ate. She was visibly healthier and happier than when he had found her. "Sandra, you can see for yourself that Isabella is well cared for." "It's not up to me, Mr. Montgomery. The complaint was forwarded directly by Judge Sebastian Cordero. I'll be there in 2 hours for a full evaluation." After hanging up, David realized the pressure had begun. Sebastian was using his position to create legal problems that would force Isabella's removal from his home. "Uncle David, why are you worried?" Isabella asked, noticing his tension. "It's nothing, Princess. Just adult stuff." For the next 2 hours, David and Mrs. Carmen meticulously organized the house, ensuring everything was perfect for the inspection. Isabella's medical documents, proof of enrollment in the private school he had chosen, records of appointments with a child psychologist. Everything was in order. Sandra arrived on time, accompanied by a social worker David didn't know. They went through the entire house, checking Isabella's room, the play area, the kitchen, even the garden where she played. "The house is adequate," Sandra admitted after the inspection, "and Isabella seems to be adapting well." Then what's the problem? The specific complaint alleged that the child was being questioned inappropriately about her traumatic past, causing unnecessary stress. David frowned. Who would make such an accusation? As I said, it was anonymous, but apparently someone with detailed knowledge of the situation. While Sandra made notes, Isabella approached shyly. "Mrs. Sandra, can I say something?" "Of course, dear. Uncle David takes very good care of me. He never hurts me and always protects me. I don't want to leave here." Sandra looked at the girl with a thoughtful expression. There was something in Isabella's sincerity that was impossible to ignore. "Mr. Montgomery," Sandra said in private, "I need to be honest with you. The pressure to remove Isabella isn't coming from any real evidence of inadequacy." "What do you mean?" "Judge Sebastian has been personally insisting that cases like this should be referred for institutional placement. He claims that single men are not a suitable profile for caring for young girls. That's pure prejudice. I agree, but he has the legal authority to order the transfer if he wants to." After Sandra left with a report favorable to David, he decided he could no longer wait passively. He called Charlie Mendoza and they arranged an urgent meeting for that afternoon. "Charlie, I need legal protection for Isabella. Sebastian is clearly trying to take her away from me. I've already started researching legal precedents. But David, I have some worrying news. Maurice Todd Sanders was found hospitalized last night." "Hospitalized? Why?" "Officially, severe alcohol poisoning. But I spoke with a contact at the hospital, and it seems he was beaten before being admitted." David felt a chill. Someone silenced him. "It seems so. And now our main witness is in an induced coma. We have to act fast, Charlie, if Sebastian is willing to go this far." "I've already thought about that. I'm going to file for a protective order for you and Isabella, alleging threats against your safety." That night, David barely slept. Every noise in the house put him on alert, wondering if Sebastian would send someone to try to take Isabella by force. He installed security cameras and hired a private guard to patrol the property. It was in the middle of the night that he received an anonymous call. "Montgomery, you don't know who you're messing with," a distorted male voice said. "Stop investigating or you'll lose more than the girl." "Who are you?" "A friend giving some advice. Sebastian Cordero isn't just a corrupt judge. He has protection from very dangerous people. Give up while you can." The call was cut off, leaving David more determined than ever. No matter how dangerous it was, he would not abandon Isabella. The next morning, as he was taking Isabella to school, he noticed a dark car following them. The same car appeared when they went to the supermarket in the afternoon, and again when they returned home. "Uncle David, why is that car always behind us?" asked Isabella, who had also noticed. "It's just a coincidence, Princess," he lied, but decided to change their routine immediately. Instead of going back home, he drove directly to Charlie Mendoza's office. The secretary received them with a sense of urgency, and Charlie appeared visibly agitated. "David, we have a bigger problem. I discovered that Sebastian isn't just forging isolated documents. He's involved in a land-grabbing scheme that has been going on for decades." "What do you mean?" "Families are forced to sell properties for ridiculous prices, or their deeds are forged to make it look like they owe money. Then the lands are resold to investors for real market prices." David felt a disturbing recognition. "Charlie, can you check something for me?" I want to know the history of the lot where I found Isabella. Why? Sebastian showed specific interest in that property during the hearing. I thought it was strange at the time. Charlie made a few calls while Isabella played in the waiting room. 20 minutes later, he returned with a grim expression. David, you're not going to believe what I found. What is it? That lot originally belonged to the Montgomery family. To your family. David was shocked. That's impossible. My father never owned property in downtown Cedar Creek. According to the old records, your grandfather, Joseph Montgomery, owned a large area in the city center. But in 1980, when your father was only 20, the property was lost to pay off debts. What debts? Questionable debts, signed by Joseph himself, but which your family always claimed were forged. The lawyer who processed the debt execution was Sebastian Cordero, David completed, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place. Exactly. He was young at the time, just out of law school, but he was already involved in the scheme. David looked at Isabella, who was drawing peacefully, oblivious to the fact that she was at the center of a conspiracy that had spanned generations. Does that mean Sebastian sold me back a property that was originally my family's, and charged a hefty price for it? The price you paid was 3 times the market value. But why would he do that? Why not just keep the land away from me? Because he needed someone to find Isabella, Charlie said, realization dawning in his eyes. Think about it, an abandoned child on a property he knew you would buy, found by you specifically. Are you saying it was a setup? I'm saying Sebastian wanted you to find Isabella, but on his own terms. Now he can claim you have questionable motives for keeping her. After all, you just happened to buy the very lot where she was. David felt nauseous. He had been manipulated from the beginning, and now Sebastian would use that manipulation to justify removing Isabella from his home. Charlie, we need to find Claire urgently. She's the only one who can expose this whole conspiracy. And how do you plan to get to her? Maurice said the clinic has private security. Then we'll have to get creative, David said, looking at Isabella. Because I'm not going to let them take her from me, and I'm not going to let her mother rot in a clinic for crimes she didn't commit. What David didn't know was that Sebastian was already preparing his next move, and that time was running out much faster than he imagined. 3 days later, David put into action a risky plan he had developed with Charlie. He knew he couldn't approach the Northwood Clinic openly, but he had discovered that Dr. Lisa Foster had a psychologist sister who worked in Austin and could help them. Luciana agrees to help us, Lisa said during a private conversation in her office. She knows people who work at the clinic and can try to get information about Claire. Is it risky for her? Very. But she has worked with victims of forced institutionalization for years and knows how these situations work. If Claire is really there against her will, Luciana can help. Meanwhile, Isabella began to show signs of stress. She had noticed the changes in routine, the constant presence of the security guard, and especially the tension David was trying to hide. "Uncle David, why are you sad at night?" she asked during dinner. "I'm not sad, Princess, just worried about some adult things. Is it because of me?" The question broke David's heart. "Of course not. You're the most important thing in my life. Then why are there men watching our house?" David realized he could no longer completely shield Isabella from the truth. She was too smart and too perceptive to be fooled. "Isabella, do you remember your mommy Claire?" "Of course I do. She sang to me and took care of the roses." "I'm trying to find her, and some people don't want me to." "Ah, bad people?" "Yes, bad people who made your mommy go away." Isabella was quiet for a long moment, processing the information with her precocious maturity. "If you find Mommy Claire, will I have to leave you?" "I don't know, dear. But the important thing is that your mommy is safe, right? Can I stay with both of you? With you and mommy? The innocence of the question touched David deeply. We'll see what happens, okay? The next morning, Charlie showed up with urgent news. Luciana managed to confirm that Claire is a patient at the clinic, but the situation is worse than we thought. How so? She has been on antipsychotics for 4 years, kept in a state of almost permanent sedation. The doctors at the clinic genuinely believe she suffers from paranoid schizophrenia, based on Sebastian's forged reports? Exactly, and now she actually exhibits psychotic symptoms, but they're caused by the medication itself and the prolonged isolation. David felt anger boiling in his chest. They've destroyed her mind. Luciana said it's possible to reverse the condition if the medication is gradually stopped and she receives proper treatment, but that would take months. And in the meantime, Sebastian is free to do whatever he wants. There's something else, David. Luciana found out that Sebastian visits Claire monthly, always alone, always at specific times when there are fewer staff at the clinic. For what? Probably to check if the sedation is working and if she isn't recovering her memories. At that moment, David's phone rang. It was Sandra Oliver with the call he dreaded most. Mr. Montgomery, I need to inform you that Judge Sebastian Cordero has issued a court order for the immediate removal of Isabella. On what grounds? He claims that evidence has emerged that you have conflicts of interest in the case related to land issues. What evidence? Apparently, the lot where the child was found has historical connections to your family, and this raises questions about your true motives for keeping custody. David looked at Charlie, who shook his head with a grim expression. It was exactly what they had predicted. When is this going to happen? David asked. The team will arrive there in 2 hours to make the transfer. After hanging up, David panicked. He had 2 hours to decide what to do with Isabella. Charlie, I can't let them take her. You saw what she was like when I found her. David, if you resist a court order, you'll be arrested. And that doesn't help anyone. What if I leave town with her? That would be kidnapping, technically. Sebastian would use it to justify anything. David looked out the window and saw Isabella playing in the garden, completely oblivious to the fact that her life was about to be turned upside down again. There is an alternative, Charlie said hesitantly. What? Luciana said she can try to get Claire out of the clinic today if we act fast, if we can bring her back and she confirms everything about Sebastian. Is it possible? It's risky, but possible. Luciana has contacts who can help during the afternoon shift change. Then let's do it. David, if this goes wrong, we're all going to be in serious trouble. Sebastian won't forgive this. If we do nothing, Isabella will go back into the system, Claire will remain locked up, and Sebastian will get away with it. I can't live with that. Charlie made a few quick calls, coordinating with Luciana. The plan was audacious. They would drive to Austin, Luciana would create a diversion at the clinic, and they would try to remove Claire using falsified medical documents she could provide. And Isabella? David asked. She has to stay. If she disappears, Sebastian will mobilize the entire police force. I can't leave her alone with Sandra coming. Lisa can stay with her. Officially, you were at her office the whole time, discussing medical issues about Isabella. An hour before Sandra's arrival, David said goodbye to Isabella without her knowing it was a farewell. Princess, I have to go out for a few hours to take care of something important. About Mommy Claire? Yes. About your mommy. Dr. Foster will stay with you, okay? Okay, but come back soon. I will, I promise. David kissed Isabella's forehead and left the house, knowing it might be the last time he would see her as his daughter. During the drive to Austin, Charlie tried to reassure him. If we can bring Claire back and she testifies about everything that happened, Sebastian will have no way to keep up the charade. And what if she's too medicated to speak coherently? Then we improvise. Charlie, there's something I didn't tell you. Last night, someone tried to break into my house. What do you mean? The alarm went off around 3 in the morning. When I checked the cameras, I saw a hooded figure trying to force the back door. Why didn't you tell me? Because I knew you'd try to convince me to give up. And I'd be right. David, these people are dangerous. That's exactly why I have to act now. If I wait, it might be too late. When they arrived in Austin, Luciana was waiting for them in the parking lot of a mall near the clinic. She was a woman in her early 40s, with a determined but nervous expression. I got the transfer documents, she said, handing a folder to Charlie. But we have to act in the next 30 minutes. It's the only time the supervising nurse isn't in the wing where Claire is. And if they find out? David asked. If they find out during the operation, you two run, and I'll take full responsibility. I'll say it was an administrative error. Luciana, you could lose your job. I'd rather lose my job than know an innocent woman has been drugged against her will for years. Driving to the clinic, David's heart was pounding. In a few hours, he would know if Claire was really alive, and if he could save her. And most importantly, he would know if he could save Isabella from being separated from him forever. What he didn't know was that Sebastian had already found out about the plan and was waiting for them to arrive at the clinic. The Northwood Clinic was a modern, sterile building surrounded by well-kept gardens that contrasted with the grim nature of what happened inside. David, Charlie, and Luciana approached through the staff entrance, using the temporary badges she had procured. Claire is on the 3rd floor, West Wing, Luciana murmured as they walked through the silent corridors. Room 327. She's usually asleep from the medication, but they suspended her doses today because she had an allergic reaction. Is that good or bad? David asked. Good for our mission, but she might be confused and scared. It's been 4 years since she's seen the outside world. When they reached the 3rd floor, Luciana went to check if the nurse on duty was distracted, leaving David and Charlie waiting in the hall. The atmosphere was oppressive. Cold fluorescent lights, lifeless white walls, and a silence broken only by the distant sound of televisions and muffled conversations. It's clear, Luciana signaled, indicating they could approach room 327. David took a deep breath before opening the door. What he saw shocked him. A thin, pale woman was sitting on the bed, staring out the window with an empty expression. Her hair, which Isabella had described as long and beautiful, was cut short and lifeless. Her hands trembled slightly, a side effect of the heavy drugs. "Claire," he called softly. She turned slowly, her eyes taking a few seconds to focus on him. There was a deep confusion in her gaze, as if she couldn't fully process what she was seeing. Who are you?" she asked in a hoarse voice, clearly not having used her vocal cords for conversation in a long time. "My name is David Montgomery. I've come to talk about your daughter, Isabella." The mention of Isabella's name provoked an immediate reaction. Claire sat up straight in bed, her eyes widened, and she began to tremble more intensely. "Isabella? My baby. Where is she? They said that she had." "She's alive and safe, Claire. She's with me." Claire began to cry, tears streaming silently down her thin face. "I knew it. I always knew she wasn't." She paused, struggling for words. "My head gets fuzzy, but I always knew my baby was alive." "Claire, we need to get you out of here. You're being kept here against your will." "I can't. They said if I leave, I'll hurt people, that I'm sick." Charlie approached. "Mrs. Claire, the doctors who said that were lying. You are not mentally ill. You were brought here by someone who wanted to silence you." "Sebastian," she murmured, and the name came out like a curse. "Sebastian Cordero did this to me." "Do you remember what happened?" David asked. Claire pressed her hands to her temples. as if trying to organize fragmented memories. I worked in an office. I saw documents about stolen land, families being cheated. She paused, breathing heavily. I tried to tell someone, but Sebastian found out. He said I was crazy, that I was imagining things. And Isabella? I left her with my sister Norma. I thought it would be for a short time, that when I proved I wasn't crazy, I could get her. Claire began to sob. But I never got out of here. Every day they give me medicine that makes my head cloudy. Luciana appeared at the door, signaling urgently. We need to go, now. Someone's coming. Claire, are you coming with us? David asked, extending his hand. She hesitated, looking around the room that had been her prison for 4 years. What if they're right? What if I really am dangerous? You're not dangerous. You're the mother of a beautiful little girl who needs you. With trembling movements, Claire stood up and took David's hand. She was wearing only a hospital gown, and Luciana quickly gave her a coat to wear. They left the room and headed for the elevators, trying to maintain a casual appearance. But when the elevator doors opened on the ground floor, Sebastian Cordero was waiting for them, accompanied by 2 private security guards. Dr. Luciana, Sebastian said in a cold voice, I imagine you have an explanation for removing a patient without medical authorization. There was a family emergency, Luciana stammered. What a coincidence! Exactly when Mr. Montgomery decided to visit her. Sebastian looked directly at David. I thought we had reached an understanding about not interfering in matters that don't concern you. Claire, upon seeing Sebastian, recoiled instinctively, clinging to David's arm. No, I don't want to go back to the room. Please. Claire, dear, Sebastian said with false kindness, you're confused because your medication was suspended. You need to get back to your treatment. I'm not confused, Claire shouted, her voice echoing through the lobby. I know very well who you are and what you did to me. A few people in the lobby stopped to watch the commotion. Sebastian realized the situation was getting out of control and gave a discreet signal to the guards. Mr. Montgomery, you are interfering with the medical treatment of a psychiatric patient. That is a crime. The crime is keeping her here against her will, David retorted. She was committed by court order after a proper medical evaluation. An evaluation based on reports forged by you. The accusation echoed through the lobby, and now several people were paying attention. Sebastian realized he needed to end the situation quickly. Guards, escort these people out. The patient is to return to her room immediately. That's when Charlie intervened. Judge Sebastian, before we take any drastic measures, perhaps we should discuss this in private. There are complex legal issues involved. Sebastian hesitated, realizing Charlie might be bluffing or might actually have something compromising on him. What kind of legal issues? Issues related to the forgery of property documents, particularly involving the Montgomery family. Sebastian's expression changed subtly. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm sure you do, and I'm sure you wouldn't want this information to become public. A tense silence fell over the group. Sebastian was clearly weighing his options, while Claire clung to David as if he were her only salvation. Judge Sebastian, Luciana said bravely, as a medical professional, I request a second opinion on the patient's mental state. If she truly needs to be here, an independent evaluation will confirm it. And if she doesn't, Charlie added, her forced confinement will constitute kidnapping and false imprisonment. Sebastian realized he was in a delicate position. With people watching and security cameras recording everything, any overly aggressive action could backfire on him. Very well, he said finally. The patient can be re-evaluated by independent doctors, but it will be done in a controlled environment with proper supervision. No, Claire said firmly, surprising everyone. I'm not going back to that room. If you need to evaluate me, let it be somewhere else. David looked at her with admiration. Despite years of medication and isolation, Claire still had the inner strength to fight for her freedom. All right, Sebastian agreed, but his gaze promised consequences. But this won't change anything regarding Isabella's custody. David's stomach tightened. He had managed to free Claire, but in the meantime, Isabella had probably already been removed from his home. "Where is my daughter?" Claire asked, sensing the tension. "She's in a safe place," David replied, but the words sounded hollow. He no longer knew if that was true. As they left the clinic, with Claire leaning on his arm and still trembling from the effects of the medication, David realized he had won a battle but perhaps lost the war. Sebastian would not give up easily, and now he knew exactly where to hit them. The drive back to Cedar Creek was tense and silent. Claire dozed in the back seat, exhausted from the effort of staying awake and lucid after years of heavy sedation. David drove anxiously, constantly checking his phone for news about Isabella. "Charlie, call Lisa. I need to know what happened." Charlie made the call while David tried to keep the car steady. Claire woke up at the sound of their voices and sat up, trying to gather her thoughts. Lisa answered. Charlie said, "Isabella is fine. Sandra took her to a temporary foster home, but Lisa managed to accompany the process as the responsible doctor." "Where is she?" "Hope House, right here in Cedar Creek. It's a small, well-run institution." Claire stirred in the back seat. "My daughter is in an orphanage?" "It's temporary," David assured her. "Now that you're free, we can fight for legal custody." "How long was I away from her?" Claire asked, her voice breaking. 4 years, Charlie answered gently. Claire began to cry silently, holding her head in her hands. 4 years? She probably doesn't even remember me. "She remembers," David said. "She talks about you all the time, always asks when you're coming back. How is she? Is she okay? Is she healthy? She was very ill when I found her, but she has fully recovered. She's a strong, intelligent, vibrant little girl." "Where did you find her?" David hesitated, not knowing how to explain the circumstances without traumatizing Claire further. "Your sister Norma had left her in an unsuitable place, but I managed to get her out and take care of her." "Norma," Claire murmured. "Where is Norma?" Charlie and David exchanged a look. "Claire, your sister? She's gone, a few months ago." Claire was completely silent for several minutes, processing the loss. "It was because of me, wasn't it, for taking care of Isabella?" "It wasn't your fault," David said firmly. "It's Sebastian's fault, and the people who work with him." When they arrived in Cedar Creek, it was late afternoon. Charlie suggested they go to his house first, where they could plan their next steps without being watched. "Claire needs clothes, proper food, and especially time to readjust before seeing Isabella," Charlie said. 4 years of heavy medication leave their mark." "How long?" David asked. "A few days at least. She needs to be minimally stable to get custody of Isabella." At Charlie's house, his wife Maria prepared a warm bath and clean clothes for Claire. When she came out of the bathroom, she looked like a different person, still thin and fragile, but with more dignity. "Thank you," she said to Maria. "It's been a long time since someone treated me with kindness." During dinner, Claire slowly began to tell her full story. "I worked as a secretary at the law firm Almeida and Associates. It was a good job, which allowed me to support Isabella on my own. Her father was never in the picture." "What happened at the firm?" David asked. "I started noticing irregularities in the documents I was typing, property deeds with strange dates, signatures that looked different, values that didn't make sense. I thought they were mistakes, so I took them to my boss. And then Mr. Almeida got very nervous and told me to forget what I'd seen, but I couldn't. I realized that entire families were losing their land over debts that might not even be real. Charlie took notes carefully. Did you make copies of the documents? I did. I kept them at home, thinking they might be important one day. When I finally decided to report everything, I found out that Mr. Almeida was working directly with Sebastian Cordero. How did you find out? I saw them talking in the office after hours. Sebastian was furious, saying there were information leaks and they needed to find out who was spying. Claire paused to drink some water, her hands still trembling slightly. The following week, I started getting strange calls, people saying they knew where I lived, where Isabella went to school. I was terrified and decided to leave town with her. But you couldn't. No. The night before we were supposed to travel, men came to my house. They said I was having a psychotic episode and needed treatment. They had documents signed by doctors I had never seen. And Isabella? I managed to call Norma in the last few minutes. I begged her to pick up Isabella from the neighbor's house, where I had left her while I packed. That was the last time I spoke to my daughter. Tears streamed down Claire's face as she relived those terrible moments. At the clinic, I tried to explain 1,000 times that I wasn't crazy, that I just wanted to protect my daughter. But the more I talked about forged documents and conspiracies, the more they believed I was delusional. And the copies of the documents you made, Charlie asked, hidden at home, in the old yellow house where Isabella and I lived, if they're still there. Where is this house? 247 Blossom Street, but it was sold after I was committed. I don't know if the new owners found. David and Charlie looked at each other. It was an important clue, but also a dangerous one. If Sebastian knew about these documents, he would have surely tried to find them. Claire, would you feel ready to see Isabella tomorrow? David asked. More than ready. It's what I want most in the world. But what if she doesn't recognize me? What if she's afraid of me? She won't be afraid. Isabella talks about you every day. She draws the two of you together, sings the songs you taught her. A faint smile appeared on Claire's face. She still remembers the songs? She does, and the roses in the garden too. I took such good care of those roses. They were the only beautiful thing I could offer her back then. The next morning, David woke up early and went to Hope House. The institution was indeed well maintained, with a colorful garden and attentive staff. He found Isabella playing alone in the courtyard, building a dollhouse with wooden blocks. "Uncle David," she shouted, running into his arms. "You're back. They said you had traveled." "I did travel, Princess, and I brought a surprise for you." "What surprise?" "Someone very special wants to see you." Isabella's eyes shone with hope. "Mommy Claire?" "Yes, your mommy is here." Isabella started to cry with joy, hugging David tightly. "She came to get me. Can I leave here?" "Let's talk about that. First, how about you see her?" During the drive to Charlie's house, Isabella couldn't stop asking questions. "How is she? Does she still have long hair? Did she bring the roses? She's a little different, Princess. She's been sick, so she's thinner and more tired. But she's your mommy, and she loves you very much." When they arrived at Charlie's house, Claire was waiting in the living room, wearing a simple dress Maria had lent her. Seeing Isabella walk in, she stood up trembling, covering her mouth with her hands. "My baby," she whispered. Isabella stopped at the door, studying Claire's face. For a moment that seemed like an eternity, mother and daughter looked at each other, trying to recognize in one another the changes that 4 years had brought. Then Isabella ran into Claire's arms, and the two embraced, crying. It was a moment of pure emotion that moved everyone present. "Mommy, you got so thin," Isabella said, touching Claire's face. "You've grown so much, my princess. You're so beautiful. I knew you would come back. Uncle David said you were taking care of the roses in a faraway place." Claire looked at David with deep gratitude. Your mommy would always come back for you, no matter what happened. As mother and daughter reconnected, David and Charlie knew the battle wasn't over. Sebastian would not give up easily, and they still needed to find the documents that would prove his guilt. But at that moment, seeing Isabella finally in her real mother's arms, David felt that at least a part of justice had been restored. 2 days after the reunion, Claire had stabilized enough to officially begin the fight for Isabella's custody. Charlie was preparing the necessary documents when they received an unexpected visit at his home. Maurice Todd Sanders, still visibly bruised, but determined to talk. "I need to tell you everything before Sebastian finds out I left the hospital," he said, looking nervously out the window. "Maurice, you should be in the hospital," Charlie said. "I can't stay there. Sebastian has people even in the hospital. But I found out something you need to know about the documents Claire hid." Claire sat up in her chair. "You know where they are." "I know where they should be, but there's a problem. The house on Blossom Street was bought by one of Sebastian's front men right after you were committed. They tore the house apart, looking for those documents." "Did they find them?" David asked. "No, and that made Sebastian furious. He's sure you hid them somewhere he can't imagine." "Where did you hide them, Claire?" Charlie insisted. Claire pressed her hands to her temples, trying to remember through the fog that 4 years of medication had created in her mind. "I remember making copies. I remember being scared, but I can't remember exactly where I put them." "Try to concentrate. Was it inside the house?" "I don't know. Maybe not. I remember being with Isabella. It was a sunny day." She paused, taking a deep breath. "We were going to the bank, I remember now. We went to the bank to open a savings account for Isabella." "And the documents?" David pressed. "A safe deposit box. I rented a box at the Cedar Creek Central Bank. But I don't remember the number, I don't remember the password." "That can be verified," Charlie said, noting everything down. "If you really rented a box, there must be records." Maurice grew agitated. "But you don't understand. Sebastian has contacts in every bank in the city. If he finds out Claire had a safe deposit box, then we have to act fast," David said. That afternoon, while Isabella played in the yard under Maria's care, the adults headed to the bank. Charlie had called ahead, confirming that there was indeed a safe deposit box rented by Claire 4 years ago, but that it was in arrears for non-payment. "Normally, after 2 years of non-payment, the contents would be removed," explained the manager, Mr. Anthony. "But there were bureaucratic problems because the lessee was declared mentally incapacitated, so the process was suspended." "Can I access it now?" Claire asked. "You need 2 witnesses and proof that your mental capacity has been restored." Charlie presented the medical documents Luciana had provided, attesting that Claire was competent. With David and Charlie as witnesses, they were taken to the bank's basement where the individual safe deposit boxes were located. "Box 247, the manager said, stopping in front of a small metal door. "Do you remember the combination, ma'am?" Claire looked at the box number, 247, and something clicked in her mind. 247 Blossom Street, it was my address. She tried the combination using Isabella's date of birth. Nothing. She tried her own date of birth. Nothing. "Try the date you moved into the yellow house," David suggested. Claire thought for a moment and typed in a new combination. The box opened with a soft click. Inside was a sealed plastic folder and an envelope. Claire removed the items with trembling hands. "It's them," she whispered, recognizing her own handwriting on the notes accompanying the documents. The folder contained at least 50 pages of copies of documents, forged deeds, fraudulent powers of attorney, records of fraudulent transfers. The envelope contained a letter written by Claire herself, dated the day before her commitment. Charlie quickly examined the documents. "Claire, this is enough evidence to bring down not only Sebastian, but an entire network of real estate corruption." "Can I read the letter?" David asked. Claire opened the envelope and read it silently first. Her tears began to fall again. "It's a letter for Isabella," she said. "It explains everything that happened and why I had to leave her. I was afraid something would happen to me." They carefully put everything away and left the bank. But David noticed a familiar car parked across the street, the same dark car that had followed them days before. "We're being watched," he murmured to Charlie. "Let's split up. You take Claire to your house. I'll go with the documents to my office to make copies." But when they separated, David realized that two cars were now following them. One went after Charlie, the other continued to follow him and Claire. "David, I'm scared," Claire said. "We'll be fine. Charlie knows what he's doing." But when they arrived at David's house, they found the front door wide open and clear signs that someone had ransacked the place. Overturned furniture, open drawers, papers scattered on the floor. "They were looking for something," Claire said. David immediately called Charlie, but the call went straight to voicemail. He tried again, without success. "Something's wrong," he said. Just then, David's phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize. "Montgomery, imagine my surprise to discover that patient Claire had escaped from her treatment," said the unmistakable voice of Sebastian Cordero. "Where's Charlie?" "Your lawyer is fine for now, but it seems he was carrying some very interesting documents. If you hurt him, I haven't hurt anyone. I've merely recovered property that was stolen from me. Those documents prove your crimes. Documents can be forged, Montgomery, especially by people with a history of mental instability." The threat was clear. Sebastian would use Claire's past against her. "What do you want?" "Simple. Claire returns to the clinic voluntarily. You stop asking questions. And Isabella is placed with a suitable adoptive family, far from here." "Never." "Then your friend Charlie is going to have some very serious problems, and so will you." The call was cut off, leaving David and Claire in despair. "He has the documents," Claire said. "Without them, we'll never be able to prove anything." "Charlie is smart. He must have made copies. But when they tried to call Charlie's office, the secretary said he hadn't arrived and that they were worried about his whereabouts. That night, David and Claire returned to Maria's house, where she was taking care of Isabella. The girl immediately sensed the tension in the adults. "Uncle David, why is Mommy crying?" "We have some problems, Princess, but we're going to solve them." "Is it because of the bad man?" David and Claire looked at each other. "What bad man?" "The man who came here looking for you. Aunt Maria said he asked questions about me and Mommy." Maria approached, visibly nervous. "David, a man really was here. He said he was from CPS, but something seemed off. He asked a lot of questions about where you were." "What did he look like?" "Tall, well-dressed, grey hair, very polite, but with cold eyes." "Sebastian," Claire whispered. David realized there was no safe place for them in Cedar Creek. Sebastian had contacts in every institution, resources to find them anywhere in the city. "Maria, do you have relatives out of town?" "I have a sister in San Antonio." "Can you take Isabella there tonight?" "David, what's going on?" "Sebastian won't stop until he gets what he wants, and what he wants is to silence all of us." At that moment, the phone rang again. It was Charlie, finally. "David, I can't talk long. I managed to escape, but they got the original documents. But I did something that might save the situation." "What?" "Before leaving the bank, I scanned all the documents and emailed them to a contact of mine at the state attorney's office in Austin. If anything happens to me, he knows what to do." "Are you okay?" "For now, but we need to get you out of the city tonight. Sebastian isn't just trying to cover up crimes anymore. He's desperate. And desperate people, as David was learning, were capable of anything. The escape from Cedar Creek happened in the dead of night, with Charlie coordinating a careful operation to get David, Claire, and Isabella out of the city without being detected. Maria had taken Isabella to her sister's house in San Antonio as planned, while David and Claire hid in a motel on the outskirts. "My contact at the state attorney's office will meet you in Austin tomorrow," Charlie said over the phone. "Prosecutor Franklin Alves is a specialist in corruption and is already analyzing the documents." "And you?" David asked. "I'll stay here to monitor Sebastian's movements. If he tries to leave the city or destroy evidence, I need to know." During the drive to San Antonio, Claire began to remember important details about the documents she had copied. "David, one of the forged deeds I saw was for a property called Montgomery Ranch. At the time, I thought it was a coincidence with your last name. My grandfather did have a ranch, but it was lost long before I was born. My father never talked about it. According to the documents, the ranch was sold in 1979 to pay off debts, but the signatures looked forged. And the buyer was a shell company linked to the law firm where I worked." David pulled the car over, feeling as if he'd been punched. "Are you saying my family was also a victim of Sebastian?" "It's very likely. And if they were, then your connection with Isabella is not accidental." "What do you mean?" "Think about it. You bought the very lot where Isabella was abandoned, a lot that originally belonged to your family. Sebastian wouldn't make that coincidence happen without a reason." For the next few hours of the trip, pieces of the puzzle began to fit together in David's mind. His family had lost properties decades ago under dubious circumstances. Isabella had been abandoned on one of those properties. Sebastian had sold the land back to him for an inflated price. "He was using me," David murmured. "He wanted me to find Isabella, but under conditions he could control." When they arrived in San Antonio, they found Isabella playing in the yard of the house belonging to Connie, Maria's sister. The girl ran into her mother's arms, happy to be reunited with her again. "Mommy, why did we have to come here? I didn't like leaving Uncle David alone." "We didn't leave him alone, Princess. We're all together now," Claire said, hugging her daughter. Connie prepared a simple lunch while they waited for Prosecutor Franklin Alves to arrive. She was a simple but sharp woman who quickly grasped the gravity of the situation. "You're running from someone dangerous," she said, "not as a question but as a statement." "It's a complicated situation," David replied. "I know complicated situations. I lost my first husband for messing with powerful people who stole land from small farmers. I know how these people operate." Prosecutor Franklin Alves arrived mid-afternoon, a man in his 50s, with white hair and a serious but kind expression. He had brought 2 investigators and a briefcase full of documents. "I've analyzed the material Dr. Mendoza sent," he said, sitting at the dining room table. "The situation is much more serious than we imagined." "How so?" Claire asked. "Sebastian Cordero isn't just forging isolated documents. He's the center of an operation that has spanned decades, involving the systematic appropriation of rural and urban properties throughout the region." Franklin opened his briefcase and showed maps and charts he had prepared. "We've identified at least 40 families who lost their properties under circumstances similar to the Montgomery families. Debts appeared out of nowhere, documents were forged, and the lands ended up being sold to shell companies." "And then?" David asked. "The shell companies resold them to real investors for much higher prices. The profit was divided between Sebastian, some corrupt lawyers, and people in key positions in notary offices and city halls." "How did they get away with it for so long?" "Because they chose vulnerable targets, small families, farmers with no resources to fight in court, people who depended on the word of lawyers and judges." Franklin turned a page and showed a photo that made David choke. It was his father, Joseph Montgomery, very young, posing next to a rural property. "Where did you get this photo?" From the files of the original investigation into your grandfather's case, there was an attempt to investigate the loss of the Montgomery Ranch in 1980, but it was suppressed. By whom? By Sebastian Cordero, who at the time was a young lawyer, but already had important political connections. Claire held David's hand, sensing the emotional impact these revelations were having on him. Mr. Alves, why did Sebastian choose David specifically to buy the lot where Isabella was? That's the most disturbing part. We believe it was a form of elaborate psychological blackmail. How so? If David became Isabella's protector, Sebastian could use that against him. He could claim that he had questionable motives. After all, he was, coincidentally, on his own family's property. But that doesn't make sense, David said. I didn't even know the property had belonged to my family. Sebastian couldn't have known that. To him, you would inevitably discover the connection, and that would create doubts about your intentions with Isabella. While the adults talked, Isabella played in the yard with some toys Connie had lent her. But through the window, David saw her watching the conversation intently, clearly sensing she was at the center of something important. Mr. Alves, what happens now? Claire asked. Now we have enough evidence to open a formal investigation against Sebastian and everyone involved, but we need more witnesses. Maurice is willing to testify, David said. Maurice Todd Sanders. He disappeared this morning, left the hospital during the night, and no one knows where he is. A heavy silence fell over the room. They all understood what had likely happened. Sebastian is eliminating witnesses, Claire murmured. It's possible, but you are safe here, and we have police protection on the way. That night, while Isabella slept in the guest room, David and Claire talked on the porch. David, if all this works out, if Sebastian is arrested, what will happen to us? What do you mean? You saved my daughter. You took care of her when I couldn't. But now I'm back. Isabella has a mother again. David had avoided thinking about it, but he knew the question would come. For months, Isabella had been his daughter in every sense that mattered now. Claire, I don't want to take Isabella from you. That was never my intention. I know, but she loves you like a father, and you love her like a daughter. Yes, I do. So maybe we can find a way to be a real family, not by circumstance, but by choice. David looked at Claire, seeing in her not just Isabella's mother, but a strong woman who had survived years of psychological torture and could still think of her daughter's well-being above all else. Would you be willing to do that? I would, if you are. He was interrupted by his phone ringing. It was Charlie, with urgent news. David, Sebastian fled Cedar Creek this morning. He left a trail of burned documents in his office. Where did he go? We don't know. But before he fled, he made one last move. He filed a lawsuit claiming that Claire kidnapped Isabella and that you are an accomplice. That's ridiculous. It is. But legally, it complicates our situation. As long as that accusation stands, you are technically fugitives. David looked at the house where Isabella was sleeping peacefully, unaware that her life was about to be turned upside down once again. Charlie, Sebastian may be on the run, but that means he hasn't given up. He's still going to try to stop the truth from coming out. And David was right. The battle was far from over. 3 weeks later, the situation had completely transformed. The state attorney's investigation had expanded to other states, revealing that the corruption network led by Sebastian Cordero was much larger than anyone had imagined. But Sebastian himself remained at large, and his last legal maneuver had created a desperate situation for David and Claire. The arrest warrant is active, Prosecutor Alves explained during a secure video conference. Until we can reverse Sebastian's accusations, you can't return to Cedar Creek. And Isabella? Asked Claire, who was visibly losing weight from the stress. Officially, she's under witness protection. But if Sebastian manages to challenge our investigation, her custody will be in question. Isabella, now almost 5, clearly sensed the tension around her. She had stopped drawing her happy families and spent hours quietly watching the adults with worried eyes. "Uncle David, why can't we go home?" she asked during breakfast. "Because we're still solving problems with the bad man, Princess. When will the problems be over?" It was a question David couldn't answer. With each passing day, Sebastian seemed to find new ways to prolong the situation through legal appeals and political influence. It was then that Charlie showed up in San Antonio with news that changed everything. "Maurice is alive," he said, entering Connie's house with an expression of relief mixed with urgency. "What do you mean?" David asked. "He didn't disappear. He went into hiding. And for these 3 weeks, he's been recording conversations with people involved in the scheme." "What conversations?" Charlie opened a small suitcase, revealing recording equipment and dozens of tapes. Maurice got former clerks from the notary offices, city hall secretaries, even doctors who signed false reports to confess everything. He has proof that Sebastian ran the operation for over 20 years. Where is he now? Hiding in Dallas, under the protection of contacts from the state attorney's office, but he made a discovery that will shock you. Charlie placed a recorder on the table and pressed play. Maurice's voice was clear, talking to someone they didn't recognize. "Tell her about the Montgomery woman," Maurice said in the recording. "Marianne Montgomery. She found out about the scheme 3 years before she died," a female voice replied. "She was investigating the loss of her husband's family properties." David felt the world spin. Marianne was investigating. "Keep listening," Charlie said. "Marianne had documents that would prove the Montgomery grandfather's debts were forged. She was going to report everything." Sebastian panicked. "And her accident?" "It wasn't an accident. The car's brakes were sabotaged. Sebastian had her killed." The silence that followed was deafening. David stood up abruptly, walking to the window, trying to process that his wife had been murdered. "David," Claire began, but he raised his hand, asking for silence. "Marianne died because of me," he said finally. "Because she was trying to get my family's land back." "It wasn't your fault," Charlie said. "You didn't even know she was investigating. I should have noticed. I should have paid attention." Claire approached him. "David, if you had known, you probably would have tried to stop her, and Sebastian would have found another way to silence you both." "There's more," Charlie said, pausing the recording. "Marianne's death wasn't enough for Sebastian. He found out she had hidden copies of documents, so he spent years searching for where she might have kept them." "And did he find them?" "No. But when Claire started investigating the same scheme, he saw an opportunity. He could use Claire to find out where Marianne had hidden the evidence." "How?" "By forcing a situation where Claire and Isabella had a connection to you. If you got close, sooner or later, you would mention where Marianne used to keep important things." The diabolical complexity of Sebastian's plan was revealing itself. He hadn't just wanted to silence Claire, he had wanted to use her to get to the evidence Marianne had left behind. "Where did Marianne hide the documents?" Claire asked. David thought for a long moment. "She had a home office that I never touched after she died. I told myself I'd organize it one day, but I never could." "Sebastian must have searched your house several times over the years," Charlie observed. "But Marianne was very smart. If she really hid something, it wouldn't be in an obvious place." That afternoon, Prosecutor Alves arrived with a police escort and authorization for them to return to Cedar Creek under official protection. "The investigation has progressed enough to ensure your safety," he explained, "and we need David to help us find any evidence Marianne might have left. And Sebastian? Still at large, but we have arrest warrants in 4 states. He won't be able to run forever." The trip back to Cedar Creek was emotional for everyone. Isabella was excited to return to Uncle David's house, but also nervous because she didn't fully understand why they had to flee. When they arrived at the house, David felt a tightness in his chest. The place had clearly been searched several times. Furniture out of place, drawers open, broken objects. They really looked everywhere, Claire observed. But they didn't find it, David said with sudden certainty, because I know where Marianne would hide something really important. He led them to the backyard garden, where there was a small greenhouse Marianne used to grow orchids. The structure was intact, but the plants had long since died. Marianne spent hours here. She said it was her peaceful place. David began to examine the greenhouse carefully. He removed empty pots, searched shelves, until he noticed something strange about one of the floorboards. "This board is loose," he said, kneeling. With Charlie's help, they managed to lift the board, revealing a small compartment where there was a sealed metal box. Inside the box, they found not only documents about the Montgomery Ranch, but also a letter addressed to David himself. "My dearest David," Marianne's letter began, "if you are reading this, it means something has happened to me. I discovered that our family was the victim of a terrible crime, and that the people responsible are powerful and dangerous." The letter explained in detail how Marianne had discovered the scheme, how she had collected evidence, and most importantly, how she had realized she was being watched. "I know it's dangerous to keep this information, but I can't let others suffer what our family suffered. If something happens to me, please use this evidence to bring justice." The letter ended with a revelation that made David cry. "And if one day you find a child who needs protection, remember that sometimes the universe gives us a chance to repair past injustices. Love that child as I would have loved our children." Isabella approached David, seeing him cry. "Uncle David, why are you sad?" "I'm not sad, Princess. I'm emotional." Aunt Marianne left a message saying you are very important. Did she know about me? She didn't know about you specifically, but she knew that one day I would find someone special to care for. That night, with all the evidence finally gathered, Prosecutor Alves confirmed that they had enough material not only to arrest Sebastian, but to dismantle the entire corruption network. "You did it," he said. "Justice will be served." But the real victory, David knew, had already happened. Isabella was safe, Claire was free, and they had become a true family, not by chance, but by choice and love. All that remained was one last confrontation with Sebastian Cordero. If you liked this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment on what you thought of my story with a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.